Call the meeting to order on April 21st, 2016. Carmen, please call the roll.
Here.
Southern. Here. Aquila.
Here. We have minutes to be approved for March 24th, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Reports, resolutions, and communications from staff?
Just a couple. First is, in your packet, you have a conflict of interest form. This is a standard form that our legal department asks you to fill out once a year to list any potential conflicts you might have in the future, and you make that part of the public record. And we'll have copies of that for the board members that are not here for our next meeting. But if you please finish filling that out, I believe you're probably well underway to finishing it. But thank you very much for that. The other staff report is that our new planning director, Chrissy Langley, has started. This is her third week now, and she's jumped right on board and is getting herself acclimated to everything going on in the city. She did have a conflict tonight, was not able to come to the meeting, but we hope to have her in attendance at our May meeting. And that is it.
Thank you. First petition tonight is UVV-11-16. Staff report, please.
Good evening. The first petition tonight is located at 415 South Washington Street. You can see it here on the map. The property is located just south of the Middleway House. The property is 0.16 acres and is currently zoned CG. The GPP designation is downtown. The property is vacant, and surrounding uses, like I said, Middleway House is to the north. There is single-family residential to the east, multifamily to the west, and then there's a City of Bloomington utility storage building directly to the south that you can see there, 423. So this is just a little bit wider shot so you can get an idea of where we are, and that's Goldcasters there at the bottom left with the parking lot along Washington. So again, the property currently sits vacant. It is bordered by Washington on the west and an alley on the east and north sides as well. So the petition request before you tonight has a few points to it. The first request is a use variance to allow first floor residential. That is not currently allowed in the CG zoning. The other variances are development variances. The first is to the front yard parking setback. The second is to the side and rear building setback requirements. And then the third is to the buffer yard and landscaping requirements. So the petitioner, the actual project overview for what they would like to build on the site, it's a 3-story mixed-use building with commercial, 856 square feet of commercial space on the first floor, and 9 one-bedroom apartments. One of those one-bedroom apartments they would like to include as a ground floor unit, and that's why the variance is needed for the use. So you can see here, this is a rendering of what they expect the building to look like. The one-bedroom unit would be located there in the front left corner. The reason for the inclusion of the one-bedroom ground floor unit is that state code requires one accessible unit for a project of this size. So the options would be to install an elevator or have the unit on the ground floor. Our code, which does not allow the ground floor unit in this zone, was written before that state code was written. This site is in a bit of a unique area. You could see on the aerial that this property and the CBU property are both zoned CG, but all the other surrounding zoning is either CD, which does allow first floor residential, or multifamily residential, which also allows first floor residential. So this is kind of an island of CG located here, and that is why it's not allowed to have the unit. So the petitioner included these. The building on the left is kind of the inspiration building of what they would like their building to look like where they got the design ideas. And then the building on the right is directly across Washington. It's another project that this developer has completed recently. This building has ground floor units in it, but again, because it is zoned CD, that's allowed. Well, in this particular overlay of CD, it's not allowed everywhere, but it's allowed in this location. So for a use variance, we look at the growth policies plan, and the growth policies designation for this lot is downtown, and some of the items from the plan that are designated for downtown include increased residential density, intensified usage of vacant and underutilized buildings, and expansion and diversification of mixes of uses, not only at the larger scale, but at the neighborhood scale. I put in also some of the information from the CG district intent to provide areas for medium-scale services not detrimental to surroundings, and mixed use where standalone has traditionally dominated. And also located in the code is guidance for Board of Zoning Appeals and Plan Commission when looking at projects in the CG area. And so here are a couple bullets from that. The site plan design should incorporate mix of commercial and residential uses with shared parking, and encourage the furthering of sustainable development, which can include open space, mixed uses, permeable pavers, and consumption reduction. So the Plan Commission, as you know, makes a recommendation for use variances to the Board of Zoning Appeals. They heard the petition at their April 11th meeting and sent a positive recommendation with a vote of 6-0. So as I mentioned before, the site, which is circled here in blue, is one of 2 CG lots that are completely surrounded by CD and RM zoning. And there is a physical constraint on this site that is unique, uniquely restricting the development. So currently where the red box is, there is a culvert that runs underground that is a city-maintained culvert. And there are long-term plans to move that culvert. They'd like to move it in this general area, so further away from the property, still on the property, but closer to Washington. The issue is that there is no funding source for that project. There's no timeline been established. So they know they will do it, and they don't know when they'll do it. So that area with this culvert and the future culvert restricts about 40% of this lot. So to be able to develop the lot at all, you would have to develop the rear portion as this petitioner is showing. When the new culvert is built, it is very likely that the old culvert will also remain. So there will be some underground development that's a little bit uncommon on a large percentage of the lot. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the development variance requests. First is for front parking setback variance. The requirement is for parking to be set 20 feet behind the front building line of a building. And the way that the UDO describes development in this zone, that building would be built close to the front of the property line, and parking would be in the rear. Because of the location of the culvert and the future culvert, no buildings can be built on that portion of the lot. So the building has been pushed to the east side of the building, and the petitioner is requesting 5 parking spaces in the front. So that there will also be, 3 parking spaces in the building. So they will service the commercial and some of the residential units. The second variance from development standards is for the side yard setback. So the side yard setback requirement in CG is 7 feet. What they've provided is 1 foot here. Again, the culvert location restricts the area that is able to be developed on the lot, and so because the east-west area is restricted, they have basically expanded the north-south to the maximum to try to get a building on the lot that works with their design. The CBU building built to the south is also built very close to the property line. Typically in CD zones, so the surrounding zone, that small property, that small setback is typical and is the UDO calls for. So this lot is being built more toward that sort of design standard, where the buildings would be closer to, you would expect the buildings to be closer together. Here they have also requested a rear setback variance. Again, the requirement is 7 feet and they're showing 5. And we think, obviously a unique characteristic of the lot that affects all these variances is how much the development is restricted by that culvert location. So they have been able to take the building 5 feet off of the alley line, and there's no immediate development on the other side of the alley. It's the backyards of the residential multifamily. So the buffer yard requirement is 15 feet on the east side. That's the only side that's required to have a buffer yard, and that is because it is abutting the RM zone. They are asking for no buffer yard. As you can tell there, that's basically the entrance for the 3 garage spaces, and also, I believe, trash. So they, there is no room with this design for a buffer yard. Again, limited by, the restrictions of the culvert. I don't know what happened. It just closed. Okay, let me see if I can find that. It's shutting down.
Oh, great.
Huh, okay. Well, while it's doing something, we were having technical difficulties earlier. The last variance they're requesting is just general landscaping variances. Again, based on the location of the culvert, there are just places where they won't be able to plant trees or certain kinds of plants. And because the new culvert is gonna run right along Washington, for example, there won't be room for street trees because of the way the sidewalk immediately abuts the road there. There's no tree plot that they could meet that requirement in. So they will be, their current plan is deficient, slightly deficient in the landscaping department, but staff feels comfortable that we can get pretty close based on the physical restraints of the lot to the densities that are required, not necessarily in the places where the code would request. So I will go ahead and I obviously have other slides we can look at in a minute, but staff recommended approval of the variance package with 5 conditions. Clarification that approval allows for only 1 ground floor unit, or there to be another development come through later, that is all that is allowed. Final approval of the City of Bloomington Utilities Agreement related to development over and around the culverts is required before a certificate of zoning compliance can be issued for the site. And final approval of phasing of landscaping and permeable paver installation will be left to staff discretion. Final approval of both interim and final landscape plan will also be left to staff discretion. And prior to occupancy, the petitioners will record a zoning commitment to complete pavers and final landscaping within 4 months of relocation of the Jordan River culvert. So basically, this development would be built in 2 phases. The building would be built along with the parking. The parking would be paved. A majority of the landscaping would go in, and that's the landscaping that's kind of in the middle of the lot that wouldn't be disturbed by the new culvert. Then once CBU moved the culvert, the petitioner the parking lot would have to be raised for the culvert to be moved. Once the new culvert is put in place, then the petitioners will install permeable pavers in the parking area and the remainder of the landscaping along Washington. So it would be a 2-phase project, and the conditions would ensure that the petitioner's portion would need to be done within 4 months of CBU being finished with their portion. So I can answer any questions while we're figuring this out, if you have any, or I can try.
Great job doing that without the technical support,
Thanks.
so thank you. Petitioner's representative. Please state your name. Do
Steve Breha.
you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
I don't plan on taking that much time, but
Thank you.
I want to thank, obviously, the staff that's here, and also City of Bloomington Utilities for working with us on this project. Obviously, from the slides that you've seen, and hopefully you can recall, this is a very constrained site. Not only constrained with the location of the existing box culvert, but with location of the future box culvert. And to give you an idea of the size of the box culvert, a lot of times you think, oh, it's an underground storm pipe, it's a big one, it's 48 inches. Well, this is like 6 feet deep and 12 to 15 feet wide, so it's a huge encumbrance on this piece of property. So what we've tried to do is put the best building that we can on this, recognizing the location of the culvert, and then work as much as we could to follow kind of the CD standards. And Jackie alluded to that. The site itself, as you can see, with the CG zoning, is kind of an island. If you look at this site plus City of Bloomington Utilities site next door, the combined area of CG zoned land along Washington Street here is less than a half an acre. So it's almost an anomaly that it's a CG zone. One of the items that is critical in this is also the timing. Obviously, this is what the project would look like when completed, but it needs to be done in phases. And primarily because of the fact that when that box culvert is relocated, that construction will encumber the whole front portion of the lot, removing just about all of the improvements. The parking in front of the building, we realize that's not permitted by the UDO, but if you look at the adjacent sites, Middleway House to the north and Goldcasters across the street, both have parking in front of the building. Ultimately, when the project's completed, we are planning about a 3-foot tall decorative retaining wall along the backside of the sidewalk, in addition to the streetscape landscaping shrubs that we can install in that area. So that will screen the parking lot to the greatest extent possible. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you have for me.
Thank you. Questions for staff and/or petitioner? Jack?
Yes, just a clarification to staff. The phasing on the parking, phasing on the landscaping. When the building's built, an area will be landscaped, and did I understand you to say that the remainder would be paved, and then that paving would be removed once this box culvert was taken care of? And clarify that for me.
Yeah, I think I muddled two things here. So there's a line you can kind of see here where I think I know how to do this. Hold on, let's see. There's a line here that runs, am I doing this right, Steve? Oh, here we go. Here it is. Everything east of this line, landscaping-wise, will be installed in phase 1. So all of this landscaping here is going to be installed. What would wait for phase 2 is those plants along the streetscape and this tree, because they'll be directly impacted by the new culvert. So in phase 1 of the development, you would see all this landscaping installed, but this area here that is showing as permeable pavers would be asphalt during phase 1.
Okay.
And then once CBU is done, this landscaping is installed and these permeable pavers are added. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it makes sense to me. Why not install as much of the permeable pavement now as you can, and rather than pave?
Steve, you want to answer?
The permeable pavers need to discharge to a drain location because there's an under drain under the pavers. So we can't discharge those to the box culvert that then CBU is going to fill in. And it's going to be abandoned in place, but it's going to be filled with concrete, filled with flowable fill. The other concern is even though City Utilities is going to do the construction in kind of the crosshatched area, they will have construction equipment and vehicles and materials in the whole front parking lot portion of this lot. And our concern is if we put those pavers down now, they're going to be damaged, probably beyond repair with construction equipment. To dig that hole, if you will, they're going to have a great big excavator sitting there digging the hole. So if it damages the asphalt, that's not a big deal because we're going to take it out anyway.
I guess what I'm getting at is pavers can be taken out. They can be taken out, they can be piled up someplace on the side or off-site. So it seems to me that's not,
They can, but when pavers go down, they're permeable pavers, it's part of an entire system. So you've got the permeable pavers, then you have 4 inches of coarse aggregate, or excuse me, fine aggregate, then 4 more inches of a little larger aggregate, and then about 12 inches of number 2 stone. And the way pavers operate then, water permeates down through that. What you'd end up doing, Jack, instead of just taking the pavers aside, after that was all complete, you take the pavers, you take the granular base, you take everything out all the way back down to dirt and rebuild the parking lot.
second point I wanted to make on this was this drain is going into the existing box culvert, which may or may not be there for the next decades. So I don't really see that as an issue in paving or not paving. It seems to me that that could be put in, and whatever's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years is sort of immaterial. I don't want to belabor the point. I really wanted to get clarification on what was going on there. I'm not sure if I have any real issue with this or not, but I wanted to get it out for discussion.
Any more questions?
No.
Jenny?
A couple. So what will you be doing with the front? Putting grass there? I assume just extend the lawn out until after the project? You
Not-
have some lawn there, and I understand that you're going to put in right away over by the.
Yes, it
building.
would, the sidewalk would extend all the way out to the public sidewalk. And then both sides of the sidewalk would be lawn area.
Okay.
We just can't put the landscaping right up along the streets, the public sidewalk. And then obviously the decorative retaining walls, we can't put those in either.
Okay, I want to say that I really admire the Fox Building across the street. I think it's the most attractive apartment building in Bloomington right now. And I was wondering, it's very well finished all the way around. I was wondering why you're not putting the brick all the way around on this building. It's only on 2 sides, correct? I thought I saw that in the packet.
No, it's.
Is it brick all the way around?
Please state your name.
Justin Fox?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You are a petitioner, correct?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
So the front, it's modeled after a building in Chicago in my neighborhood that's got steel front and a brick all the way around. But typically, the other 3 sides aren't the face brick, so we're using a half brick or a thin brick on all 3 sides that match the full brick on the face. So all
Okay.
4 sides will look similar.
Oh, good, thank you. I don't know where I got that impression, but I did. I must say it's in the packet somewhere, maybe it was a mistake.
Showed siding on 2 sides.
You know,
Okay.
one other thing I might add,
Only questions if
Okay,
staff
you got
asks,
it.
please. Thank you.
anything else?
No. Well, let's see. Yes, I noticed that you have your balconies facing south instead of north. And that overlooks the city building with, I believe, probably a tar paper roof or something. Have you no concern about that you don't face it the other way?
We set those back 5 feet for a building code issue, so they're actually a 5-foot porch that faces south that'll look over that building.
I was just had some concern about access into the apartments from that roof or possibly you know, students getting out on that other roof?
We aren't renting this building to students, just like the
Okay.
building across the street.
Okay. Also, it's mostly single-family housing from that way. Hopefully, you will have grad students and adults there, but if there are louder students, then it would be better if they faced the downtown instead of the residential area. So I was just
Sure.
wondering if that had been taken into account.
It had, this is, we looked at a bunch of different ideas, and this is what we thought would work best.
Okay. Well, it'd be cooler if it was facing north, but,
Okay,
I mean, heat-wise, but, okay.
thank you.
Okay, I think that's all my questions, other than maybe for the staff. Any particular reason this is CD instead of CG, or, it's just really weird, that's just a little spot of it there.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. The primary reason is that these lots were not included in the downtown plan. So the CD zoning matches the boundaries of the downtown plan that was done, the downtown vision and infill strategy plan, which then raises the question, why wasn't this property included in the downtown plan? And I just can't answer that. I don't know. I don't know if it was an error. I don't know if it was a conscious decision of not extending further south in the alley. But that's the reason why it's not zoned commercial downtown, is because it was not included in the downtown plan.
Okay. The only other comment I wanted was when I looked at the site, I noticed directly behind this building, if they're going to be putting a lot of money in it, there's a raw dirt embankment behind it. It's like 8 foot. There might have been a retaining wall at some point, but it's definitely not at code right now. Somebody needs to go, I'm not sure if you
Neighboring
guys are the
property across the alley.
directly behind
Okay.
where they're going to be buildings. It looked
We'll take a look at it.
seriously like a problem for planning to look at. Thank you.
Can I make a comment as well? Part of what I was going to say before everything went crazy, was that part of the unique, or something that we kind of identified as unique about this property is the conflict about it being GPP downtown, but Zone CG, because GPP downtown, once mixed use and close buildings, and it's just hard to reconcile that with the CG, and so then kind of requires variance to be able to develop to those ideas. So I meant to mention that earlier, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone in the public would like to comment? Please
what I
state please state your name.
Gail Fairfield?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 5 minutes.
I'm sorry?
You have up to 5 minutes.
Oh, I don't need that long. I was just curious that, I heard, but I don't know if I heard it all, that they're going to do that culvert thing at some point, but there's no time frame for it. I live at 425, so I'm like, half a block south of that, and I'm wondering about the timing and the extent of the street being torn up or that whole area being inaccessible.
This is only a time for comments,
Pardon me?
so only a time for comments, not for questions for staff. Thank you.
Fairly, it won't take long. So the sections to the south have already been rebuilt. So the sections immediately south of this property, heading down towards the furniture store and to the south, have already been rebuilt. They were rebuilt a few years ago. Sections to the north, from this property up to Trinity Episcopal Church, that's a section that hasn't been built yet. So it's the northern reaches that are going to be built. My understanding is that because of the way it has to be constructed, it has to be built from the south to the north, so you'll see the southern ends being built first. But in terms of logistics of construction, we're way off from that. And we're not even sure yet if it'll be done in 1 phase or 2 phases or 3 phases. Still yet to be determined, and we don't even know how we're going to pay for it yet. But the sections to the south, the sections closer to your house, have already been rebuilt.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, back to the board for action.
I will move approval with the 5 conditions given in the report.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any comments?
No.
I just have one comment to add. After I've been through the big dig in front of our main store, people underestimate how big that is, that culvert, and how much property is required to do it and do it well. So it's a big project. So I understand why they're doing the paving right now, short term, before they do it. Carmen?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes, petition is granted. Scrolling.
Sorry, pulling up the second one here.
No, I've been told that sometimes I move too quickly. I need to give you
No,
time.
that's fine. And normally it would be open, I just realized we didn't.
As long as it doesn't shut down again.
Yeah, with the switching of the laptops.
Okay, there you go.
Next up, case V-13-16, staff report.
Thank you. V-13-16 is located at 1532 South Maxwell Street. You can see located on the image on the right, south of East Hillside Drive. The property is currently zoned RS and is a vacant lot. The GPP designation is urban residential, and the property is surrounded by single-family residential uses. The request before you tonight is a request for a variance from the requirement to build sidewalk with a new single-family residence. So the petitioner would like to build a house on the lot, and what comes along with that is being required to build sidewalk on their frontage. There is no adjacent sidewalk in the area, and there do not appear to be any topographic obstructions to being able to build the sidewalk. So the ordinance basically looks at, 5 findings, and you have to find them all to be true to be able to grant the variance. And while staff found no injury to the public and no substantially adverse impacts, staff did not identify peculiar condition with the site or topographic problems. So based on that written report, staff recommends denial of the sidewalk variance request, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Please state your name. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Could you tilt the microphone just down a touch, please? You have up to 20 minutes to present your case.
The reason I brought this variance before you is in the last 18 years, 12 houses have been built in this 2 blocks that I live in, and none of them was required to put sidewalks in. Back when the YMCA was built, our street, Maxwell Street, was the road to get to the Y. And the city started buying property on the east side, which is the opposite side of my property, to put sidewalks in. So I just feel like that if sidewalks are going to go in on this street, it will have to be put in by the city, and they will most likely put it on one side because the Maxwell Lane, Nancy area where they put the sidewalks in, they only put it on one side. And they're already purchased property on the other side, so I would think that would be the side that the sidewalks would go on. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for staff and/or petitioner by the board? Jenny?
No, I did have a question about the staff, about the properties probably that she just referred to. There do seem to be quite a few new properties down there, and I was puzzled that they didn't have, and I didn't remember variances coming through about them in the last 8 years. So do you have any idea what's going
There is
on?
a policy issue, policy change that occurred, but first I would like to specifically address the ones we did I did look up the 3 that you mentioned along South Maxwell in the 1700 block. One of them did have an addition permit from '07, so, you know, theoretically could have changed quite a bit. The property record card from the assessor indicates that the actual house was built in '92, and another one was built in '88. The third does say '07, it's the one on the corner where sidewalk was built on the south side, and I wasn't able to find record of why it was only on one side in the amount of time that was from when we talked. I did look through our building permits and found that the last single-family residential new construction permit issued for Maxwell Street was from 2003. So none in the last 13 years of strictly new construction, which would be what would require a sidewalk. And then Jim can speak to the policy issue.
About 10 years ago, there was a change in policy. Prior to that time, new homes on existing lots of record were not required to construct sidewalks. It was discovered then that around 2005, I want to say that date's right, there was a very old section of the city municipal code, not in the zoning code. It was buried in another part of the code that said that whenever you build a new building, you must build a sidewalk. So when we discovered that, we started requiring it on all new buildings. Prior to that time, sidewalks were only required for subdivisions, creating new lots, and for commercial additions and new construction, but not for homes on existing lots. When that section of the municipal code was discovered, there was a change in policy, and we did start requiring sidewalks for all new single-family homes, even those on existing lots of record.
Okay. So I guess I had, the last question I would have would be, I think I know what you're talking about, and I know the code that you're talking about. There used to be a second section to that they used a lot that was like a fund, did like a promissory variance, and it came out that when, you know, the city decided they were going to put a sidewalk in, they needed a sidewalk then the owners of the property did have to foot the bill then. Is that disappeared from the UDO now?
No, that is still part of the code.
Okay.
So there are two types of sidewalk variances. One is called a permanent sidewalk variance, and my understanding is that's what the petitioner has requested. So that is a ruling that sidewalks aren't necessary now and may not ever be necessary in the future. There's something unique and peculiar about the property that makes it difficult or impossible to build sidewalks. The second is what we call a determinate sidewalk variance. So determinate sidewalk variance basically states that the sidewalk doesn't make sense now, but it might in the future. And in the future, the sidewalk should be built. And we used to do a lot of determinate sidewalk variances. They're very difficult to track. They're very difficult to enforce, especially after the property has changed hands 2 or 3 times. It's quite a burden if you buy a property and you didn't realize this requirement was in place and the city comes knocking. Today's the day to put your sidewalk in, and you had no idea that requirement was there. My understanding is also that the petitioner did not request a determinate variance. They requested a permanent variance.
All right, thank you very
If
much.
I can make a comment to that as well. One of the findings for a determinate variance is that the adjacent lots are undeveloped. So, you know, there was this is obviously a developed neighborhood. So in doing the pre-meetings, you know, we went over what the findings for each were, and that one seemed insurmountable in this case.
Okay, thank you very much.
Questions, Jeff?
No.
Anyone in the public would like to comment? Seeing none, any final comments from the petitioner?
I just want to say that the permanent variance was recommended to me because I was told that I did not qualify for the determinant. So, thank you.
Thank you. Back to the board for action.
I will move to deny the sidewalk variance request.
Second?
Carmen?
Comments. I'm going to say the same thing I said last time something like this came up. In the staff conclusions, they didn't find anything that would really allow this sidewalk not to be built. I agree with that. No peculiar conditions, no topographic barriers, not endangering public safety or pedestrian safety, and so on. I just can't find anything to hang on there that says this sidewalk should not be built. While I don't necessarily agree with what's in the ordinance, and I think we should look at it, I think what I have to do in this case is go along with the staff recommendation, which is to deny.
If I could comment just very briefly, we had this discussion last month, and we'll continue to have this discussion. This issue has been raised with our new planning director. There are changes that need to be made to our sidewalk code. It doesn't make sense in some circumstances, and it's become something that we're regularly seeing requests for variances for. There are ways that we can change it, whether that's changing when it's required or changing the criteria for approval of variances. It is something that is certainly a priority for me, but I'm not quite sure what the timeline is for bringing forward an ordinance amendment, but we are certainly thinking about it and looking forward to that in the future.
We're in the midst of a vote, correct?
Say that again?
We are in the midst of a vote, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes is for denial.
Yes?
Yes. Motion is denied. Meeting is adjourned.